Today I'm going to demonstrate the 12 steps to yeast dough production. The first step is to scale out your ingredients, so you weigh everything out so it's accurate. Then we're going to take our slightly warm water and our active dry yeast in this case, and we're going to put it in the water. And you want to let your yeast sit in the warm water for 2-3 minutes just to kind of dissolve a little bit. It won't completely dissolve, it'll get a little lumpy, but just so that it will soften. While you're doing that, we're going to put it on the mixer. Make sure your mixing bowl is completely on your mixer. And then we're going to use the dough hook attachment. And this will replicate kneading the dough. So once you've given your yeast a little bit of time to absorb some water, you're going to take your flour, and this is 22 ounces of bread flour. We're going to use almost all of it. We'll leave a little bit out. This is the straight dough mixing method. So the second step is mixing it. So we'll leave a little bit on the side just in case we don't need it all. And then you add your salt. You always want to put your flour in before you add your salt because salt is very important in yeast dough production. It controls the growth of the yeast and gives it flavor and helps develop gluten. But if the yeast comes in direct contact with the salt, it will kill the yeast. So turn it on low. Once it starts to come together, turn it up a little bit. And you can see most of the flour has been picked up. At this point, I'm going to scrape down the bowl. And feel it, maybe add just a tiny bit more flour, but not all of it. And then turn it back on low. Of course, when you add flour, don't add it on high. Once all the flour has been picked up, we can turn it up a little bit. And now we're going to start kneading the dough. We want to knead our dough until it's nice and smooth and elastic. At this point, you could let the dough rest for 5 minutes and let all the gluten absorb water, and then come back and just finish it in a minute or two, or you can continue on to knead it from start to finish. That time where we let the gluten absorb the water shortens the kneading time, and especially if you're kneading by hand, that is a good thing because it takes a lot of energy to knead by hand. So you can see how the dough is looking different than it was, but it's still a little lumpy, it's still a little broken up, so it has to go a little bit further. I'm thinking it needs a little bit more flour. So if you look at the dough now, it's smoothing out, it's getting a stretchiness from the gluten development. So maybe 1 more minute. So our dough is done pretty much. the dough hook off. And if you look at the dough itself, you can see it's smooth and elastic, has a good stretch to it. One way you can test to see if it's kneaded enough is you take a little piece off and then roll it in your hands. And if it gets smoother and stretchier, then it needs more kneading, and if it starts to kind of fall apart like this is, then it's done. So from here, I'm going to put a little tiny bit of oil in the bowl, and then I'm going to cover it, wrap a little bit of oil on top of the dough, and then I'm going to cover it with a towel. And now it's time for it to do the bulk fermentation. Bulk fermentation is where it doubles in size. This is the period of time where you develop most of the flavor for the bread. So very important. The longer your bulk fermentation, the better your bread will taste. So we'll be back in a couple hours. Our dough has had time to rest and bulk ferment. It is now ready to move on to our folding or punching stage. And this is where, once it's doubled inside, you press the air out. From here, the next step is to scale out portions. And this particular recipe makes approximately 12 French rolls. So what I do is I divide it, create a log, divide the log in two, and then into 4 pieces. And then each piece I divide into 3. While you're working on the dough, you want to try to keep it covered, and you want to start with the ones that you did first. Gluten needs to relax, or it will stretch and just kind of spring back to the shape that it was to start with. So what I want to show you now is how to round. And the way we round is by pressing the dough against the table and then pulling it back to create a seam on the bottom. So again, you take your dough, cupping your hand, using your fingers to tuck the dough under and creating that seam. Push and then pull back, tucking with your fingers. Once you start to get used to doing this, you start to do it with 2 hands. And the idea is you're creating surface tension so you get a nice smooth roll. So I'm not rolling like that. I'm actually pressing the dough and stretching it. At this point, you need to let the dough rest again for 15 to 20 minutes. This is called benching. And since we're not actually making any other shape besides nice round rolls, what I'm going to do instead is take them and place them directly onto my pan. to space them evenly. Again, we cover them to keep them from drying out and forming an elephant skin. And from here, we're going to double in size again during our proofing stage. If these were a richer dough, you wouldn't want to, at this point, if you proof them till they're double, they would collapse in the oven. But this is a real lean dough. You saw we had no fat in it at all. So we're going to let them double in size. Again, it should take about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Our rolls have had a chance to double in size. When you press on them, they don't spring back. What you want to do is take a sharp knife and just score the tops gently. It gives a place for the steam to escape. And then I have an oven, 450 degrees for a lean dough, with a pan of a little bit of water in the bottom. So I open up the oven and I put the rolls in. And then I take water and I create some steam and I close the door. This will give your rolls a golden color and help create a crusty French bread. Without the steam, they just don't get as much color and they don't get as crusty. The rolls have been in the oven about 20 minutes. They should be done, let's see. Nice and golden colored. You pick one up and thump the bottom and it should sound hollow. And they're ready. The next step to yeast dough production is you want to let them cool, move them onto a rack so there's air circulating. If you leave them on the pan, moisture can build up and then go soggy. So you want to move them to a rack and let them cool off. And once they're completely cool, you can wrap them up to store them or, of course, serve fresh.